Good to have you with us live in the swamp today. And joining us now, David Williams, the president of the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. David, good to have you with us, man.
Where do we start? There's so much to talk about. There's Mitch McConnell, there's tax reform, there's health care, there's net neutrality. There's so much going on. I'm sorry, so much not going on in Congress. Where do we start, John?
You know, I'm on the air 4 hours a day, and what happens is I get to 3 minutes to 10 when I'm going to go off, and it's like we've covered 1/5 of what went on that day. I mean, you just can't get to it. You're right, David. There's so much going on. I want to start with the rally today. This is the Day of Action.
Yes.
Day of Action rally. More than 60 participating nonprofit organizations. At least 43 have received George Soros link. All we're going to do is follow the money for this stuff, David. I mean, you get up here in the swamp, you just follow the money. It all leads you to wherever you got to go. You follow the money. The organizers of the July 12th Day of Action, what the heck is this?
So basically, this is the left trying to convince people that the government should control and run and regulate the Internet. I mean, really, this is what's happening, is that the folks on the left don't want the private sector building out networks. They don't want the private sector doing this. They think the government is a more efficient entity to run the Internet than the private sector, and it's ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. And you have really some of the big companies like Twitter, Google, Facebook. They are the ones that are also funding this effort because they want to get a competitive advantage over their competitors. And they're using the lefty groups, and they're trying to use the government. And, you know, the fact of the matter is that the Internet has flourished, you know, in spite of the government, not because of the government.
It's crazy. Let's get to net neutrality.
Yeah.
Because we got to get, look, I got to get off this Donald Trump Jr. email nonsense that's going on before my head explodes. Let's talk about some things that really matter. I talked about this online gambling thing today, and we're following the money on that because that's driving bananas. We got the military generals trying to add another branch of military to expand the federal government. That's under everybody's radar screen. Tell us, though, a little bit about net neutrality. People hear the term, David. It's thrown out there, but explain it in layman's terms. Somebody's going to work today, trying to get to the shipyard. Why does net neutrality, what is it, and what does it mean to them?
So it's meaningless. The term net neutrality has become meaningless. And generically what it means is keeping the Internet free and open for all to use. But it's been co-opted by the left to mean government regulation of the Internet, is that they want to put additional regulations, and, you know, I don't want to get too technical here. They want the Internet regulated just like phone companies are. They want it to be like a utility. And that's just not going to work with the Internet. It's an information service. It is not a utility. And that's where the left gets this wrong. But net neutrality has really just lost all its meaning, because who doesn't support a free and open Internet? I mean, everyone supports that, right? So it's we can agree on that.
When net neutrality was making its way through Congress, it was stuck in Chairman Bob Goodlatt's desk. It was stuck on his desk forever. He just tabled it. But what Tom Wheeler did when he was chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, unlike Ajit Pai, basically they wanted to regulate it so that certain firms couldn't buy faster service than others, right? I mean, that was what the basic regulation was, right?
That's correct. And former FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler really took a huge leap forward in this, and the net neutrality and the Title II stuff. But here is what a lot of people aren't talking about. Well, two things. Is that if it gets the same sort of regulations as the phone companies, it means more taxpayer subsidies to build out these networks, and not privately owned networks, but government-owned networks. So you have government building these Internet networks across the country. So we're talking about potentially billions of dollars of taxpayer money going to build broadband networks. So that's their end game here, is to spend more taxpayer money, not less. And that's why what current FCC Chairman Ajit Pai is doing is saying, listen, hands off the Internet, government. We need to let the private sector do this. And it's become way too political, and that's why Congress, and I know, Congress has done nothing this year, but that's why Congress needs to be proactive and say, we're taking this out of the politics of the FCC, and we're going to make our rules, and this is what we're going to do. So 4 years, 8 years from now, however many years from now, if there's a new FCC chairman, we don't get this reversed. We can't keep on going back and forth on this. It has to be some principles that are set and passed in legislation.
We're with David Williams. He's the president of the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. Today is the day of action. Big rally in D.C. amongst the net neutralityers, all sponsored, of course, by the left and George Soros. He buses them in. He pays them a couple of days' work. You apply on the Internet through Craigslist. You get a job as a professional protester, plus you get a box lunch, plus I guess they get free medical care or whatever they do, but it's all paid, right? These people are coming today. They get a paycheck. They're professional protesters, and George Soros
they do.
pays them. They're professionals. I mean, maybe they'll start making that a college major, professional protesting, all the legal ramifications. And, you got to pass the test, and then you can get a Bachelor of Science in professional protesting, and you can get a job in one of the many organizations fronted by George Soros. It probably pays $15, $16 an hour. And until they figure out how to get foreign students in on foreign visas and pay them a $7.25 an hour, don't give them any benefits and just give them a ice patty to eat. Until they figure that out, they'll keep paying $16 an hour. Net neutrality, how does it affect consumers?
So this is how it affects consumers, and it affects them in a very big way, because right now you have companies like Verizon, AT&T, and others that are offering free data on your phone. So let's say I think AT&T has a deal with DirecTV, where they'll give you a special deal, or ESPN, or other websites to go to and places. Well, under net neutrality, they are not allowed to do that. So if this is passed, and if net neutrality goes through, these companies cannot give you free data or free services, because that violates the terms of net neutrality. So how is that good for consumers to take away free data? And think about folks in the inner city that, they may have an Obama phone, they might, have the Lifeline program, but they're still paying something for the service. So why shouldn't they have access to free stuff? And that's what the left is trying to take away from you, is the free stuff. And you mentioned the protesters. Let's ask them if they know what net neutrality is, because they're being paid. They may not even know anything about this issue. They just may be there as a paid hack to hold a sign and to chant some silly thing.
Okay, so you're right. I mean, if I went out there today with a microphone and asked 25 of them why they're protesting for net neutrality, I guarantee you 22 of them would even have no idea what the hell it is, right? But they'd be like, well, I get $16 an hour. I got the job on Craigslist, plus I get a box lunch or something. That's where this country is now. So let's just stop the nonsense and call it what it is. I'm all for free speech and protesting, and, maybe it's a growth cottage industry. I have no idea. What are the long-term effects of this net neutrality? Now, because one of the arguments for it is, okay, so if I'm Time Warner, for instance, I'm some big company, and I want to buy up broadband space so that I can get ahead of others. So if you get your service through me, or if Netflix or whatever, you want to download something, if you're going through me, I'm going to have a bigger broadband space than the other guy because I have the resources to buy it. So I just buy it, and then I'm going to charge more, obviously, because I'm a lot faster than the other guy can be because he's in a smaller bandwidth, right? So what's that long-term effect? Because then the argument is prices for consumers that go up.
Well, there's so much competition out there. You have so many companies, and listen, cable companies, they do have these franchise agreements where, Comcast, Time Warner, you name it, they have franchise areas, but you can still access the Internet via cell phone companies, and they're building out these networks that's making internet, faster and faster. So, the Comcasts of the world are actually getting less and less important, and there's more competition because the government has had a light regulatory touch on this. So this is, and the fear of the left is that, well, these companies aren't going to allow you to access Google or Bing or any of these websites. Why would they do that? Because then you'll just drop their service, go somewhere else that actually does it. I mean, the fears are ridiculous, and and there's different types of traffic on the internet. When my grandmother sends me an email, that's a lot different than streaming a Netflix video. I mean, a lot more space is needed to stream that Netflix video than that email from my grandmother showing me, that I need to come up to Hagerstown and rake the leaves for her. So this is what we need to realize is there's different kinds of traffic on the internet, and companies need to manage that traffic so we all have a good internet experience.
Okay, so bottom line, David Williams, we're with David Williams, the president of the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. So what you're saying is you want the market to self-regulate this, let it grow. We don't know where it's going. For instance, one of the other arguments for net neutrality is I live in somewhere in a rural area in Montana. Well, I'm still doing dial-up. I have no internet, sir. I have no broadband. And what net neutrality is, hey, we're going to invest taxpayers' dollars to get it to you, where you're saying, nah, I don't think so. I think what we do is we wait until the demand is such that some company decides to do that so that they can gather all those people up as subscribers. Until that happens, they got to go dial up or they got to go through a cell tower or whatever. That's basically what your argument is, right?
Yeah, it is. And these rural areas do need internet service, and there's actually satellite that offers 25 megabyte, download speeds or whatever. But here's the thing is that government has been building these networks in cities. So they've been doing this, and they haven't been building the networks in rural areas. They're building them in Chattanooga, Tennessee, that it's not a rural city. So they've had the opportunity to address the rural areas, and they haven't done it. But, John, listen, if you like government health care, you're going to love government internet. I mean, you're going to have the same sort of effect where you're going to have companies that are just going to, die out and probably go out of business, just like we've seen in government health care, where a lot of these companies are leaving markets because it's just too expensive to serve.
It'll be like Ma Bell. Remember Ma Bell? You might be not old enough to remember that. But,
unfortunately, I am old enough.
Right? Back in the day, David, right? Everybody, some of our listeners remember Ma Bell. Back in the day, you had one telephone company, it was Bell. It was a national monopoly, regulated monopoly. You had Ma Bell, and you could never get anything resolved ever, right? Because they didn't care. And there was one customer, there was no competition, and you had to deal with Ma Bell, and they basically set the rates, did everything. And then they came out with, well, if you make a long distance call at a certain time, your rates are higher than if you do it at 2 a.m, all that nonsense you had to deal with. And that's what they want to turn the internet into, basically, where, instead of calling anybody up or you're unhappy with your service or your cell, you just switch it over. No, you're going to go through the government, and they're going to manage it just like they manage your mail flow and Amtrak. By the way,
boy, you mentioned the mail flow. I mean, the post office is another great example of what not to do and how they're losing money hand over fist. But, getting back to net neutrality is, when your listeners hear about this day of action, today, understand what's really happening here. It's a government takeover of the internet. It's going after free speech. It's going after free data. It's really the government having more control. And I thought we decided this last year that we want government to have less control of our daily lives.
No, because for the left and the progressive wing and, the George Soros-funded people, the internet is a threat to them because it's free and open, and people can get information. They can go on it. Like, they can hear my show from anywhere in the world at any time. They just download my app, hit the button I'm on, and I blast them. So they don't want that. So they'd rather control it and say, well, we can't do talk radio over the air. That's a violation of something. Or we'll have to charge them 5 times the rate and make it cost prohibitive. I mean, that's what they want to be able to do. The end game here, the end game is not to help consumers or to keep it free.
No.
The end game is to control information. That's their end game. Tell me I'm wrong.
You are not wrong, and the left is very tolerant as long as you agree with them. As once you start disagreeing, they're not so tolerant, are they? They preach tolerance, but they're not tolerant at all. And so what we're trying to do is, obviously, Taxpayers Protection Alliance, we're trying to show people that this is going to be a real cost to taxpayers, to consumers, and also to freedom.
All right, we're out of time. I want to thank our guest, David Williams, the president of the Taxpayers Protection Alliance, giving us the facts today on net neutrality and also the George Soros paid, delivered, and sponsored day of action, an internet-wide day of action to save net neutrality is what it is advertised to be, and in reality, this is just to control information. The majority of these protesters here in Washington are paid to protest by the George Soros organization. Hey, I'm out of time. I want to thank you, David Williams, for being with us. What's your website, David?
We're at protectingtaxpayers.org. And, John, thank you. And, thank you for help spreading the message. And, like you said, if you see a protester, talk to them and see if they even know what the heck they're protesting.
No idea. You know what? It's the new wave, I'm telling you, there's going to be a college class. McAuliffe is going to say we need high school, we need a vote tech class on professional protesting. Big jobs available in Virginia.